Hi, my name is Jennifer Flaherty, and hopefully you read my article on applying gradients to your photos to create some fun effects for your scrapbooking. Now I'd like to show you the most popular use of gradients, which is to simply colorize a photo. What gradients do is they apply a gradient of color to your image. So where the image is dark, the color on the left side of the gradient is applied, and where the image is light, the color on the right is applied. And you can reverse this by checking the reverse box, which I'll show you as we get into it. So let's head over to the Layers palette. We're going to click on the layer adjustment icon, which is the half black and white circle. Scroll up to gradient and click. It's going to apply the default gradient, which would be the foreground, whatever your foreground color is, to transparent. And so you see it applied to my photo. We'll change this in a minute, but I just wanted to go over what some of these things in the box are. There are different styles of different styles of gradients that you could apply. The first one is linear. The next one is radial, angle, reflected, and diamond. Okay. You could also change the angle of the gradient just by dragging around on this circle, or you could just type directly into the box. I'll put it back to the 90-degree default. Also, you could change the scale, which is best seen with the radial. You can increase the scale, which is the size of it, or you could decrease it by using the scrubber, or again, you could just type the value into it, again, putting it back to the default 100. You could reverse the gradient, like I talked about before, by clicking this box. You could select dither, and what dithering is it's a scattering of different colored pixels to make it seem like there are other colors in an image with a limited color palette. I don't really see how much this affects it, so I don't really use it. And align with layer just keeps the gradient attached to the layer below it. So now if you want to change the color of the gradient, you're going to click inside the gradient box. It brings up the gradient editor. I'm going to be using some gradients that I downloaded from the internet for free. The first one, or one of the ones that I'll be using, are from the Retroactive Gradients by Colortone, and another one is the Gradient Pack 1 by KAZUGFX. I also reference these in the article. They are for free. You could just do a Google search for free Photoshop gradients and you'll get a whole slew to choose from. First thing that we could do is we could pick a gradient, and I'm going to choose this one down here. You see it fills my photo with color, and that's okay. There are a couple of different types of gradients you could do. One is a solid gradient, another is a noise gradient. And basically what the noise does is it randomly distributes colors within a specified color range, and you can mess around with these colors by playing with the sliders down here. I've not really seen much use for a noise gradient, but you may want to play around and see what you get. And then the roughness, just sort of determines how smooth that transition actually is. So going back to solid, again, smoothness, same thing. When you play with the scrubber, it's hard to see in this, but it determines how sharply it transitions. Okay, stops. The stops on the top change the opacity, and to change the opacity of an existing stop, you would just click on it. You'll see the triangle below the rectangle turn black. See, as I click here, it's a white triangle, but when I click on it, it turns to black. That tells me that the information in this box down here is referring to this particular stop. You could change the opacity by typing in a different value here. And you could also add additional opacity stops to further customize your image by clicking above the preview area. So I could click here and add another stop, and if I don't want it, I just click on it and drag it away. The stops on the bottom change the color, and if you click on a stop, it will display the color of the stop. So if I click here, you see again that triangle turns black, and it's telling me that this is the color. Like the opacity stops, you could add color stops to further adjust how the gradient is applied, and by adding a second stop, you determine what color the midtones would take on. So I could click in here, this tells me the color, and I could click on it and I could change a color if I wanted to add some more color to this particular one. And of course, if you start playing and decide what you don't like, you can always, again, click on it and drag it away. So let's go ahead now that we've seen what all these different things do, and let's show you how it applies to our photo. So we're adding, I'm going to just remove that middle one. So we are adding this particular gradient to our photo. We're going to say okay here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to play around. I want to show you how some of these blending modes affect how it looks. This is darken, not necessarily a look that I'm going for, but when you play with the opacity slider, you just might wind up with a look that you actually like. Multiply, we'll just go through and see. Once you play with the opacity, sometimes the variations are a little bit subtle. Rather than going through all of these, you should actually play around with the blending mode so that you could see which one it is that you actually like the most when you're playing with it. And sometimes you might like one in a particular color and a different one in another color. And then when you add multiple ones, you might find you know, that when you add them on top of each other, you use different modes. So the one that I found that I really liked for this one was the overlay, and I think I had it up at about 32 when I was playing with it. Here's 33. And just to show you, if I click on the eyeball, this is what my photo used to look like. It was a great photo to begin with, nothing wrong with it. But by adding the gradient to it, it really makes it look like much more of a fall color. There's an autumn glow to it, which would really go great with some autumn layouts. So that's basically how it works on a good photo. I'd like to show you how it could actually help a bad photo as well. So I'm going to shrink this down, and we're going to bring up a new photo. This is a photo that I took of my daughter. Not a great photo at all. She's really shaded in this, but I'm going to try to play around with some blending modes and with some gradients and bring a little bit more brightness back into her photo. So I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to click on the adjustment layer icon, go up to gradients, click on gradient fill, and I'm going to go down here and add this gradient. I'm going to say okay, and now we're going to mess around with the blending modes. I am going to, I'm going to go down to soft light on this. Okay, let's check out overlay. Overlay, it's a little too pink there, but something that I do want to show you. I'm going to click on the thumbnail of the gradient, and let's see what happens when we reverse it. Okay, looks okay. Her face is a little bit green here. So let's go in and let's change the color of that gradient, how we were talking about with the stops. I'm going to click on this stop, and that shows me what the color is here. I don't want her hair to look like she's been swimming in a chlorine-filled pool. So I'm going to take that top color and I'm going to lighten it up a little. And let's try to get some of the green out. Do you see what that did there? This was the original color, little green, and if I just click up over here, it's changing it, and it's really brightening up her face a little bit more because we're putting more of a cream color at the top of that gradient, and it's still staying pink down here, which goes with her outfit. Kind of like the way it brightened that up. So we're going to say okay. Okay, I want to show you what the picture looked like and now what it looks like with the gradient, which looks really nice. We could probably even play around with this a little bit more. Let's try adding another gradient, see if we like it, and we might not, and that's the lovely thing. When you're playing with the adjustment layer masks, it's not permanent changes, so you can always get rid of it, undo what you're doing. Let's try another one. This is another pinkish one, very, very pink. Let's try this on screen. What screen does is it really, really lightens up your photo, gives it a wash of color as if it's being drenched in sunlight. And then we could lighten this effect a little bit. Let's try reversing this one and see what happens. Okay. I kind of like it, I think, the way it normally was. I think she's getting too washed out on top and too dark on the bottom. This sort of evens it out a little bit more. I'm going to reduce the opacity of this a little bit more, though. Okay, let's see what that does. Okay, again, we've really brightened up from the original, but now it almost looks like she's being flooded with sunlight. And something that would really add a nice touch to this would be to add a bokeh overlay. Again, this is bokeh is the catch lights that you get when photographing in sunlight or photographing lights and stuff like that. And if you look on the internet for free bokeh downloads, you can find one. So this is an overlay that I downloaded from the internet, and I'm just going to drag it over onto my photo, and that doesn't really look all that great. But if I change the blending mode of that to screen, now you see, all of a sudden you could see where a camera might have caught some sunlight. But I think if we reduce the opacity, it will probably look even more natural. We can move it around, this particular layer. And we kind of have a harsh line here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer mask to it. So this icon down here is a layer mask. And I'm going to come over here. I need a black brush, so I'm just going to reverse these by pressing X on my keyboard. And then B will bring up brush, or I could click on here. And I've got a nice soft brush just to show you my settings. I have my hardness set down to 0, so the edge is really soft. I don't want a hard line. 442, whatever size you want. And I'm just going to kind of click on those edges so I don't get such a harsh line where that overlay was. And I don't want to see it on the swing there. So just going to go in and soften that up. And all of a sudden, the photo used to look, show you in my history, this is what my photo started out with, and by adding a few gradients, playing with the blending modes, opacity, and adding a bokeh overlay, I've got a photo that looks like I really caught some nice light in, and it was a terrible photo to start out with. So anyway, I hope showing you all of this gets you interested in playing around with gradients and see how it can affect your photos and give you some really nice artistic effects on your photos, as well as improving some really bad shots. Just because you got a bad shot doesn't mean that you can't make a beautiful page out of it. So I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and I look forward to seeing what you create. Thanks.